Since I was a little kid, I've always dreamed of a field of bright yellow dandelions under a starry sky. Sometimes they become puffballs, and their tiny seeds were carried on the wind. Though the dream doesn't happen every night, it's always the same dream. In it, I'm at peace. It wasn't just any dream, but a vivid dream, the kind where I could feel the coolness of the leaves, or the gentle touch of the dandelion flower on my cheek, the soft wetness of the dew on the ground. It was real. My junior year in high school, I wrote about it in a free essay for English, and my teacher wrote back that it symbolized being free. She might be right, because I want to be free of my problems, free of the odd pains in my abdomen, free of my parents' constant fighting. I'm Dustin Watson, and I'm scared. 2 weeks ago, November 2nd, I turned 17, and I was normal. I was a regular kid doing regular things. I'd met a guy in math class, and we had lunch together, and we were going to see a movie together, like a date. I hoped he'd become my first boyfriend. I was a regular kid, was doing great in school, had an A- average. I hadn't told my family I was gay because Dad and my Uncle Bennett's new business was just starting off, Fitness Extravaganza, the newest gym in Vegas. And Mom did whatever new age thing she wanted. She worked at an occult bookstore and thought herself smarter than everybody else. The counselors had me look into several colleges, and even though I hadn't taken my SATs yet, they thought I had a great chance at several scholarships, including one at the University of Nevada. Life was good. Except for a couple of colds, I'd never been sick, never been to a hospital except when I broke my arm playing Little League baseball. I was a regular kid, but I didn't have a regular pain. It's not the kind of pain you can talk to your mom about. I had a dull, constant ache in my lower abdomen. My neck had an odd soreness, and what really bothered me was that one of my boys was bigger than the other, and ached if I sat funny. I didn't tell anyone because it was too embarrassing. Definitely not something you tell your mom about. One night, it kept me awake. Dad was in the living room working on papers for the gym. I finally told my dad. He thought it was an appendicitis and took time off from the gym to take me to the doctor. The doctor drew some blood and arranged for us to talk to a urologist that afternoon. The urologist took one look and referred me to the Cancer Institute of Nevada. I was 17. Teenagers don't get cancer. It had to be a mistake. They rushed the blood work. Certain cancer markers were scary high. The cancer had spread. They diagnosed me with bilateral non-seminoma testicular cancer that had metastasized to my lymph nodes. In layman's terms, it meant both my boys had cancer, and it was fast-acting, and the cancer had entered my lymph system and was invading my body. I was 17, a junior in high school. High school kids don't get cancer. I was applying for colleges and scholarships. I was about to start dating this cute guy in my math class. I had my whole life ahead of me. Then, I didn't. I was terrified all the time. Even though the doctor said that nobody can predict when cancer strikes, and anyone from a newborn to the elderly are susceptible, and no matter what all the tests said. Mom blamed Dad for me getting cancer because Dad worked at the gym on her equinox celebrations, and he'd refused to decorate the gym with all Mom's New Age crystal paraphernalia, and now the spirits were angry. Mom was weird like that. She hung crystals above my bed, had weird incense constantly burning in the house, and she painted healing symbols on my bedroom walls, and had a priest exorcise our house, and then for good measure, she had a white witch exorcise our house, and then she sprinkled moon-blessed water on me whenever she saw me. According to her, I didn't have cancer, but a malevolent entity had attached itself to me and was tormenting her faithfulness by punishing me. The doctors wanted me to see a specialist dealing with urinary cancers, and the specialist took one look at my case and scheduled me to start chemo the first Monday in December. Dad agreed and spoke to our insurance, and everything was approved within 2 days. Mom disagreed. That wasn't their first fight, or even their 100th. Me, I was scared. I went to school and spoke with the counselors and had to put everything we'd done on hold. Mom thought she could handle this holistically, and she called her witch friend to cast healing spells on me. According to Mom, the doctors were wrong. She postponed my first chemo treatment so she could get a second opinion from some man who dealt with herbs and used to have a chiropractic degree from a small school that wasn't even accredited. I called Dad, and he blew off the gym and took me to chemo anyway. Every day that week, I spent 2 hours at the Cancer Institute undergoing blood work and chemo and about 1 million tests. Chemo is customized depending on a person's cancer. My chemo treatments happened like this. First week, I had daily chemo treatments for 2 hours every morning. I got sick, I got tired, I couldn't keep food down. The second week was a recuperating week, but it meant I stayed in bed all the time. I'd never felt so bad. Third week, I felt a little better and could eat. That week, I was supposed to regain a little strength because it started all over again the fourth week. I vaguely remember my parents fighting, but they shushed it up when I was around. I was too busy feeling terrible to pay much attention. Chemo effect is weird. It's like being beat up in a boxing ring, having the worst cold you can imagine, and a non-stop hangover all at the same time. Thinking is out of the question. Normal conversations are out of the question. Emotions run the entire spectrum, usually the negative emotions. I remember several times I fell asleep only because Dad held me. Then, I was vaguely aware that he wasn't in the house anymore. Life wasn't making any sense. I wasn't making any sense. They call it chemo brain. I realized later that Dad had moved out. He'd had enough of Mom. I couldn't tell you how many times I saw the doctors during those first few weeks. The only thing I remember is that Mom always placed spiritual or magical things around my room. Strange crystal clusters, a collection of Catholic saint statues, odd medallions with honor symbols, strange prayer cards in different languages, pictures of the sun or moon or gods from other religions, and a lot of things I didn't recognize. Mom performed tarot readings daily to see if she should give me my medication, and often she replaced it with something herbal and weird that upset my already upset stomach. She constantly had some kind of strange-smelling incense in my room and refused to feed me any animal products, and she laced everything with too much garlic. It made me sick. The thing is, I had my own beliefs. I believed in God, but I didn't really follow any religion. A lot of them were unfavorable to gays. My phone woke me on a Wednesday, or was it a Thursday, or maybe Friday morning. I honestly didn't know if this was a chemo week, a rest week, or whatever. I felt terrible all the time. I vaguely remembered that last weekend was Christmas. I always wore a baseball cap because Dad had my head shaved, and what hair was left grew in splotchy patterns. It would eventually fall out. The nurse on the phone wanted to know why I wasn't at chemo. I didn't understand what the nurse was talking about. Had I forgotten something? I told Mom about the call, and she said, "You have your weeks mixed up." Wasn't Mom supposed to take me to the Cancer Institute for chemo because Dad had missed so much time at the gym? I completely forgot about my conversation with Mom, and an hour later, the doctor called. I told them to call Dad because I wasn't feeling well. Dad came over in 30 minutes, fuming, and took me to chemo. Turns out, Mom had deliberately made me miss all my appointments because she believed her remedies were more effective than chemo. And it was Christmas last week, and her friends were coming over to cast healing spells for the new year. Mom and Dad fought, and Dad packed my clothes in a suitcase and took me to live with him. I learned later that Dad filed an emergency custody order with his lawyers. It was approved by a judge on January 3rd, I didn't know he had lawyers. I didn't know he'd filed for divorce. The doctors had to redo the chemo schedule, and Dad set up a quiet room at the gym for me to sleep during the day, and he gave me his bed to sleep in at night while he slept on the couch. I didn't realize he had a one-bedroom apartment until after my round of chemo was done. Dad had been sleeping on the couch for 2 months, and I was too out of it to be aware. I wanted to feel guilty, but I felt like crap instead. My head was so mixed up that I didn't know much anyway. Between the nausea, my stomach, and my headache, I couldn't think. The doctor said that was normal for chemo. I could never warm up, and I was scared all the time. Dad bundled me with sweaters and extra shirts and a greenie beanie, and made me hold steaming mugs of coffee that I often never drank, but I remember the constant coldness and the constant fear and the constant background buzz of a low-grade headache. It was a Sunday, second week in March. First round of chemo had barely finished, but it would have finished a week ago if Mom hadn't goofed everything up. Dad was going to take me to the mall so I could get new clothes. I wore a wife-beater that hung on me, a huge gray sweater, and cut-off gray sweatpants, and my hands looked like they belonged to a zombie. I'd lost 30 pounds, and everything I owned fell off me, literally. We were at the table, having breakfast. Dad had made eggs and ham for both of us. For once, I had a little appetite and actually ate an egg. Better yet, it actually stayed down. I still felt cold all the time, so I held a hot mug of coffee that I only sipped at. I must look terrible. Deathly white skin, sunken eyes, bald. The veins showed on my hands, so I bet they showed everywhere else too. My arms and legs were so skinny that they felt like bones. The doorbell rang, and when Dad answered it, Mom barged in with a girl behind her. Mom and the girl carried several bags with them. Maybe I was still suffering from chemo brain, because I didn't recognize the girl. The girl couldn't stop staring at me. I think I scared her. Dad looked annoyed as he said, "What are you doing here?" "Introducing my son to a girl I work with," Mom said, with a smile. Me? If I wasn't sitting down, I'd have fallen over. Chemo had left me that weak. "Now is not the time," Dad said. "Dustin has barely finished chemo and is not ready for company." "Chemo?" the girl said. "Nonsense," Mom said. "I drew the Ace of Cups. That means new romance has arrived." Mom seemed to notice me for the first time. Her eyes narrowed, but her smile remained pasted on. "Darling, this is Elena. You'll fall in love with her. It's in the cards." Part of me understood what was going on. Mom was trying to set me up, I think. But wasn't it Sunday morning? Most of me did not understand what was going on. I'd never told my parents I was gay. Might as well do it now. "Mom, Dad," I said, trying to be diplomatic. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm gay." Mom spun, lightning crackling in her eyes. Well, no lightning really, but she sure looked like it. "Honey, we both know that's just the chemo brain talking. You should never have submitted to chemo. Those doctors don't know what they're doing." "Dustin," Dad said, "we already know. It's not the first time you've told us you're gay in the last few weeks, but you just don't remember." Mom placed her hands on her hips and yelled, "I will not allow my son to be gay. If you'd only stuck with me, I'd have you cured by now." "Gay?" Elena said. Her eyes never left me. I don't think she'd seen a cancer patient up close before, and I don't think Mom had mentioned how bad I looked. In my anger, I must be getting my strength back, I said, "Mom, the doctor said it's a stage 2 cancer. Your tricks won't do anything." "Stage 2? Elena said, and subconsciously took a step back. Hadn't Mom told her about the cancer either? "How dare you call them tricks?" Mom yelled. "Elena," Dad said, "Dustin is recovering from a non-seminoma testicular cancer that spread into his lymph system. That's what stage 2 means." "It's only an energy imbalance," Mom said, "brought on because a malevolent entity has attached itself to his soul. I've spoken with experts, and all we need to do is rebalance his chakras and bring his etheric energy back into alignment with his spiritual aura. I don't mean to sound impersonal, Dustin, but are you sterile? Elena asked. No, he's fine, Mom shouted. I shrugged. Dad merely said, the urologist hopes there's a chance that function may return, but right now there are no swimmers in the pool. I don't know why I found that funny, because my laugh sounded like a honking goose, and I said, they nuked the pool. I laughed again, but nobody else did. Shrieking, Mom yelled, my son is not gay and not impotent. The spirits from Vega promised me 3 grandchildren, and I will be queen of my family lineage, and they don't lie. Those doctors are quacks and idiots and don't know anything. Dustin, you will come with me right now, and we'll set up a special healing circle. Elena didn't say anything, but she did roll her eyes. Mom, you're delusional, I said. It was nice to meet you, Elena. Dad, I need to lay down. I don't feel very good. Dustin will come home with me, Mom yelled. You don't have the right, Dad said. Do you remember why the courts granted me emergency full custody? Dad said. Why? Elena asked. My wife refused to take Dustin to chemo or any of his doctor's appointments, and he missed 4 sessions, Dad said, coming over to help me stand. Let yourselves out. My son needs me. I passed out seconds before I fell. I was back in the Dandelion meadow, the night bright with a full moon, and little dandelion floaties danced in the air. Peaceful, comfortable, nobody yelling, no pain. A man's voice whispered, when you're ready, let's walk along the path. It's time to continue your journey. I'd never heard a voice in the meadow before. Who is there? I called out. Nobody responded. Off to the side of the field was a narrow footpath that I'd never noticed. I couldn't see where it led. I woke 4 hours later, and Dad took me to the mall for some new clothes. In the car, I asked him, did I already tell you I was gay? I don't remember. Blame it on chemo, he said. I don't care if you're gay or straight or standing on your head on top of the Empire State Building. I want you to survive. Like I told you then, and I'll tell you now. I love you. You are my son, and I will always be there for you. That afternoon, Dad got me a book, first one of many. Learning to Live Again, a survivor's guide. For the next 3 months, the doctors ran further tests. Much of the cancer had been killed, but not all. I was always tired, but I kept simple food down. For the first time in years, I caught a cold. The doctor scheduled my second bout with chemo, starting in June. Mom hired a lawyer and tried to regain custody of me. The judge listened to her, noted how many times she had not taken me to the doctors, and then asked me who I wanted to live with. I said my dad. Mom brought up the fact that Dad only lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. The judge didn't seem to care about that. One of my doctors testified and handed the judge my files. The judge carefully looked through them, asking questions about the seriousness of my condition. The doctor also noted that Dad had made sure I was at all my appointments while he was running the gym. The hearing lasted 30 minutes, and the judge ruled for Dad and told Mom that, according to my doctors, any change in my routine would be detrimental. Dad retained full legal custody. In the middle of the courtroom, Mom screamed, telling everybody that Dad had poisoned everyone against her, that the judge was an idiot who didn't know anything, that nobody could trust what I say because of my chemo brain, that she could cure me completely. The judge fined her $1,000 for contempt of court and told her that if she opened her mouth again, she'd get 30 days in jail. I had thought the first round of chemo was bad, but the second round was worse. I remember spending as much time in the dandelion garden as I could, staring at the night sky. I wasn't alone this time. An old man sat next to me, wearing a Hawaiian shirt and surfer jams and carrying a surfboard. His name was Cary, and every night he made sure I walked down the path. The dream seemed so real that I felt an ocean breeze blowing through the meadow. Chemo really messes with your head. Sometimes there was a second man that walked with us. I could never see his face, and he never spoke. I had a sense of what he wore, old sweats, like the weightlifters at the gym. His eyes were kind and caring and locked on mine as if he were about to cry with me. He had an inner strength that I could depend on. But he was only a shadow among dreams. Like the previous round of chemo, I couldn't warm up, and I felt hung over with the worst bender known to man, all the time. The constant fear was the worst. Even with the medication, I couldn't keep food down unless it was very simple, had no seasonings, and was a very small portion. My food of choice was a very plain, hard-boiled egg, or very small pieces of Canadian bacon that I could suck on. I had just finished the last week of chemo, and I was at the gym. Dad helped me stand on a scale. The worry in his eyes scared me. The number on the scale scared me more. I was only 100 pounds. I didn't recognize the skeleton in the mirror. The never-ending cough that suddenly shook my chest scared Dad. It terrified me. Dad had me in the hospital that afternoon, and I stayed there for 3 weeks. The doctors called it a very deep case of pneumonia and said I had no practical immune system. Late, one night, I was alone, and I fell asleep. I sat in the Dandelion meadow, watching the stars slowly whirl overhead. A skinny crescent moon peaked above the horizon, and a sea breeze blew. I was at peace. No cough, no tiredness, no constant aches. I was warm, and I didn't have to be afraid. I lay back, watching the Big Dipper. Along the edges of the meadow, the strange man walked, and the moonlight momentarily shone on his face. A kind face, a worried face, a caring face. Cary sat next to me, resting his surfboard alongside him. He wore his tie-dyed t-shirt, but he smelled like a fresh ocean breeze. When I looked at him, I imagined him surfing with dolphins. Maybe Cary could read my mind because he chuckled. "There's no water here," I said. "How do you surf?" He plucked a dandelion puffball, blew it gently, and we watched as the tiny seed scattered. Then he asked, "Isn't it time you found a man to date? Maybe share a life together? You can't depend on your dad forever. He has his own journey." A part of me knew that this was a dream, so I wasn't surprised that Cary knew everything. I sat up, picked another dandelion puffball, and blew the seeds into the air. They flew in all directions, tiny dreams that spread and danced on the wind. "I'm taking a break from relationships," I said. "Besides, I have cancer. Who'd want to date me?" Cary almost seemed to smile, and then he said, "He'll find you, but you need to be stronger, so you can dance all night with the man you love. Come on, you've been lying around long enough. Time to live." "Can't I have 5 more minutes?" I whined. "You don't have time," Cary said. "Besides, you have to get ready for Lars. He's good for you." I got to my feet, but I felt a little wobbly. The other man, whose face I couldn't see, walked towards me, placed an arm about me, and helped me slowly amble towards the path. All the pains began to come back. Cary walked beside us and said, "Just place one foot in front of the other, and he'll find you." "I won't be back to the meadow for a long time," I said. "Will I?" "Hopefully, not for a very long time," Cary said. Though we walked slow, the man in the old sweats never faltered as he helped me along the path. Odd, I grew weaker, but my mind cleared. "Cary, are you an angel?" I asked. "Next time we meet, you tell me," Cary said, but the pressure on my chest blocked out all thought. "Dustin," a voice in the darkness yelled. "It's Dad. If you can hear me, come back to us." Something gripped my hand, and Dad's voice sounded so very far away. "I've got a pulse," somebody said. "It's faint and slow and erratic." "I'll take whatever we can get," the doctor said. "Blood pressure?" "Still only double digits," another voice said. Yet another voice said, "Dustin's breathing again, but only barely." A machine beeped a soft, rhythmic beat, like a heart. Somebody sighed, and I felt an odd prick in my arm. The doctor giving me a shot? "How long was Dustin dead?" Dad said. There was a pause as if the doctor was checking something, before he said, "Just over 2 minutes." "Do you want Dustin placed on a ventilator?" a nurse asked. "Yes, I do," the doctor said. "I want Dustin transferred to critical care immediately. He is to be monitored 24/7, and give me hourly updates. I want to know the second anything changes." Something was placed over my mouth and nose. It blew air and helped me breathe. It must be my chemo brain going into overtime, because I could swear it smelled like an ocean breeze. It's been 3 years since I visited the Dandelion Meadow, and much has faded to a dream. I don't even remember the names anymore, but whenever I see the moon, or a dandelion, or a surfboard, I feel like I've forgotten someone important. I just turned 21, and my social life hasn't gone anywhere. I had a boyfriend, and we were good for a couple of months, but as soon as I told him I was a cancer survivor, he suddenly cooled off. I work for Dad, but I also work with clients as a personal trainer. I have the basic 1-year certificate, but I'm still working on my advanced certificate, and I tell my clients that. I'm also taking classes through the University of Nevada Extension Service to get a degree in fitness and health management. Because the cancer stole a year of my life, I feel behind compared to everybody else my age. Dad and I share a 2-bedroom apartment now, and I keep a small decoration of a surfboard on my desk. I don't remember why it's important, but it is. As the book Learning to Live Again said, be proud of your journey. I'm alive, but I wish I could remember the details of the Dandelion Meadow. For the gym's 10th anniversary, Dad had the gym repainted, added some new machines, replaced some of the older weight benches. Dad and my Uncle Bennett still own the gym, and in spite of the economy and my cancer, they've made it work. Mom and Dad are divorced, and Mom is dated a lot. I owe my dad and the doctors for my survival. My Uncle Bennett is a Buddhist, and he made sure they added me to their prayer roll, and they prayed for me twice daily at the Dharmakaya Buddhist Center. Next to the surfboard on my desk, I have a little Buddha he gave me. Mom takes credit for me surviving, saying it was her special crystal therapy combined with white magic that did it. I haven't told anyone that I have this constant fear that the cancer could come back. Have you ever had the feeling that you've met someone before, but in reality, it's impossible? For our big anniversary, Dad and Uncle Bennett threw out all the stops, banners, special offers, special prizes, even had a couple of local celebrities stop by. The local radio station did an on-air show located in our foyer. It was a big celebration, and if all went well, we hoped to bring in a ton of new members. Dad was busy helping some lady register. My uncle was giving tours of our facilities. Same with a couple of members of the staff. Normally, I let Dad handle new registers, but the crowd was too big. I took my pad and walked over to a guy patiently waiting. "Hi," I said. "Welcome to Fitness Extravaganza. I'm Dustin, one of the personal trainers. And you are?" "Larsen," he said, "my brother said I should check out a gym to deal with stress and maybe get in shape." "You've come to the right place," I said. "Let me show you around." I had to stop. Déjà vu. I've lived this moment before. I've seen Larsen before. Gentle eyes, a caring face, a genuine smile. "Did we go to high school together?" I asked. "I don't think so," he said. I took him around the locker room, the gym, and the racquetball courts. He was just another out-of-shape guy looking for a way to get back in shape. I'd seen 100 of them since I started helping my dad. Nothing special, nothing serious. I could see the potential in him, if he put in the work. But I knew him, somehow, somewhere. Larsen signed the contract, paid the money, and left. For a second, as he opened the door, a soft sea breeze blew with him. It reminded me of something, of dying in a hospital bed nearly 4 years ago. I stared at his signature, Larsen Dethen. The memories of chemo, of all my visits with the doctors, the constant fights of my parents, Mom's weird crystals, the time my heart stopped for 2 minutes. I remembered dandelion fuzzies floating in the cool night air. What did it mean? I took a deep breath and found the next client and helped her sign up. The next morning, Larsen checked in while I was helping somebody at the front desk. I didn't think anything of it, and later, as he was leaving the gym, he asked, "How can I get my money back?" The déjà vu hit again. I'd seen him somewhere. Had we had this exact conversation before? Where? When? I gave him the standard line because once a contract was signed, it was binding and not to be broken without penalties. He walked out, obviously upset about something. Something ached inside me, but it didn't make any sense. I'd barely met this man. What had upset him? I looked around the gym. Besides there being so many people here, it seemed normal. "Dad," I yelled, "watch the desk." I went into the locker room and into the gym and looked around. I could not shake the feeling that something had gone wrong. Very wrong. But nothing seemed wrong. I'll talk to Larsen the next time I see him. Hopefully that's tomorrow. Life suddenly got busy. A flood of people came in, and I completely forgot about Larsen. Until that night, when I got home. I sat at my desk, suddenly seeing the little surfboard and the Buddha statue. What did all this mean? Why can't I get Larsen out of my mind? The next day, I went to the gym, helped a couple of clients, helped at the gym, folded 1,000 towels, and looked for Larsen. He didn't show. It was nearly a month later when Dad pulled up the new membership records. You have to understand, when people sign up for the gym, they're excited for the first few weeks or months and attend at least 5 sessions a week, if not 7. Once they realize that a gym is a major life commitment, they begin slacking off, and within a couple of months their enthusiasm dies down. Some people thrive at the gym and begin to live here. The weightlifters, yoga practitioners, the people who find a reason to stay committed until the gym turns into a habit. Maybe they make friends. Maybe they get addicted to how their body changes. Maybe they just want a place to escape to. The point is, they don't drop off for several weeks. "Come see this," Dad said one afternoon. "According to the records, you signed him in. Do you have any idea what's going on?" Larsen Dethen's picture was on the screen, along with his contact information and membership information. He'd only been here once. We had an anomaly. Nobody spends the money for a year-long membership like he did, and then only show up one time. Larsen. Why is he so familiar? He was here for exactly 26 minutes, Dad said. Walked in, something turned him off, and then he walked out. Dustin, you probably were at the desk. Did he say anything? I racked my brain, trying to remember the very brief encounter. He wanted his money back, I said. My uncle looked at the monitor, frowned, and said, It's only one person, but it could mean that that's the only clue we will get to the problem. I hate to mention the bottom line, but when there's one person upset, there could soon be more, and that will impact business. We need to figure this out before it becomes a problem. I took another look at his picture. A normal guy. Nothing stood out, but he seemed familiar. Was it high school? Was it the hospital? Was it the cancer center? One of my clients canceled on our appointment that afternoon. Something about a sick kid. It meant I had a few extra minutes. Rather than work out, I went into the lounge that used to be my private bedroom years ago. I sat on the couch and opened my book, Learning to Live Again. I had read that book so many times. It had become my lifeline. I read about letting new friends into your life. About sometimes a healing journey begins by simply being with others. I went back to the computer, pulled up Larsen's records, and quickly wrote his phone number in the book. Was I meaning to call him? I debated about it. Usually, when people found out I was a survivor, they treated me different. It's like a wall went up between us. My old boyfriend couldn't handle it. The answer was simple. I wouldn't tell Larsen about my battle with cancer. That evening, I took my phone out to our apartment's small deck and dialed. Part of me hoped Larsen wouldn't answer. Dad was in the other room and could hear everything. When Larsen answered, I said, I'm Dustin, from the gym. I'm calling to find out why you signed up for the gym and what we did to turn you off. Maybe I can even invite you back? Larsen told me about how awkward he felt at the gym because he didn't know anything. The gym had been part of my life for so long that I had assumed that everybody knew about it. But that was arrogant thinking. I would have to talk to Dad about this later. Maybe we needed to include some kind of introductory training program. You know, I said, making everything up on the spot. Part of our anniversary discount package included 21-hour sessions with a personal trainer. Let's start tomorrow morning, and I can show you how to use all the machines. We can have some fun. Dad looked up, a surprised expression on his face. It took only a few seconds to arrange details, and when I hung up, Dad gave me the weirdest smile and teased. We didn't offer any personal training sessions as part of the anniversary enrollment package. Did you just set up a date and were sneaky about it? I shrugged as I put the phone in my pocket. Good, he said. It's about time you started dating again. You've been alone too long, and it's worrying me. I gave Dad an innocent look and simply said, I'm trying to make sure the customers are satisfied. Dad tossed a couch pillow at me and chuckled. I think you like Lars. Is he cute? Is he gay? Did you ask him what he's doing Saturday night? Lars, I whispered to myself. Where had I heard that name? Why did it sound so familiar? The next morning, I met Larsen in the locker room. I'd changed in here thousands of times, yet he seemed uncomfortable and unsure of himself. For the first time, I got a look at him. Kind brown eyes, dark blonde hair worn a little long, and he wore large baggy sweats that covered his body. Once again, déjà vu hit. I'd seen this man somewhere, but where? So I asked, we must have taken a class together. He smiled and said, Are you into journalism? No, I said, as he stepped on a scale. The rest of the morning was just us talking as I introduced him to the different machines. Larsen wasn't like a lot of people. He listened to everything I had to say, as if some part of him were taking notes. I couldn't shake that sense of familiarity. Since 1-hour sessions didn't fit into his schedule, I quickly modified it to 30-minute sessions. If he came 5 days a week, we'd work out together for 2 months. What about after that? If we got close, he'd learn about the cancer. It had put a rift between me and my last boyfriend. I didn't want that to happen with Larsen. But if I didn't tell him and he found out, why would he trust me? As we worked out together, we became closer and could not deny the traction between us. He noticed my old notebook, the one I'd plastered gay pride stickers on, but hadn't said anything. I'd noticed the sly glances he sent my way. Odds are, he was interested in me too. The classic game of chicken, which guy had the courage to ask the other guy first? What if I asked him, then told him about how I survived cancer, and he decided I was too much work to love, just like my last boyfriend? I lost the game before we even played. Saturday night, when Dad and I got home from the gym, he made a microwave dinner for himself, while I made a simple salad with boiled eggs and chicken and a little mayonnaise. I splurged tonight by adding frozen peas. Compared to most people, I eat very plain. Blame that on the chemo, and on Mom spoiling everything with too much garlic. She still thinks I'm possessed or something. You and Larsen are getting close, Dad said. Does he know yet? I don't want to take the chance, I said. What if he leaves me? Dad grunted and set the microwave timer and said, What if he doesn't? I shrugged, dropping the conversation. After working together for 2 months, Larsen and I arranged to meet one Sunday morning and spend a couple of hours lifting weights. We'd already worked on all the different muscle groups this week, so it would be a max-out day, meaning we'd work with the heaviest weights we could and max out the reps. We'd be exhausted, but it would vary our workout. I couldn't sleep. I kept dreaming about dandelions. I woke up with Dad, and we went to the gym early. Believe it or not, there are a group of people that like working out early Sunday mornings. I manned the front desk for a bit. Then Dad asked me to take care of the towels. I left my Learning to Live Again book and notebook out, thinking I'd get back to them. Lars would be here eventually. Lately, I'd started calling him Lars. It seemed natural. I put the coffee pot on, changed towels from the washer to dryer, put a new load into the washer, and took the dried towels up front to start folding. Lars was at the front desk, wearing only gym shorts. That kind of turned me on. However, he was thumbing through my book, Learning to Live Again. I froze. He was about to learn my secret. Suddenly, I was the 17-year-old cancer patient again, afraid, unsure if I'd live. Panic flooded my stomach. I'd worked so hard to get over what I had dealt with, but in an instant, it was back. Dad saw me and looked at the front desk, at Lars. Lars had found the folded pamphlets about chemo and testicular cancer. I teared up, reliving the day the doctor had told me I had cancer, reliving every time I had to go to chemo, reliving the horror of nearly dying with pneumonia, reliving the fear, the pain, the hopelessness that was my 17th year. Add to that the fights between my parents, Mom's crazy ideas, the eventual divorce. Dad walked over to Lars and showed him the picture of the skeletal kid, of me, 4 years ago. Lars stiffened, the shock evident in the straightness of his spine, in the rapid intake of breath. I remembered lying in the bed at the Cancer Institute as the doctor told me what the chemo would do, and that my chances were reasonably good, but there was always the chance of something going wrong. I remembered the fear. I remembered Dad's strong hand holding mine. I remembered the sick skeleton of a kid battling pneumonia. I lived in constant fear for a year, and still do. I was afraid the cancer would come back. I don't know what Dad told Lars, but my friend slowly walked into the locker room. I took a deep breath and tried not to panic. Would Lars even want to be around me anymore? Why would he want a trainer who had been so ill? Lars would look at me like everybody else does, afraid that maybe he would catch cancer from me, afraid that I would be contagious. Had I just lost a friend? Dad looked over at me and said, "I'll handle the towels." I set the towels on the main desk and followed Lars into the locker room. "Hi," I said, as a huge lump of emotion clogged my throat. The déjà vu hit again. Why did everything seem so familiar? Lars had taken a seat on a bench. When he looked up, his eyes were moist. We stripped and went to the steam room. "Talk to me," he said, and held my hand. Alone, amidst the heat, I let the pain, the panic, the fear, the terror, the anger, the sadness out, as I told Lars about my 17th year, about surviving cancer. Lars held my hand and let me cry. I expected him to leave me, but he didn't. In the semi-privacy of the steam, we kissed and talked and then kissed again. He wiped the sweaty hair from my forehead and whispered, "You've helped me with my journey. Now let me help you with yours." Suddenly, I remembered where I had seen Lars before. I remembered the Dandelion meadow at night and the strange person that wandered around the edges and then helped me walk the path out of the meadow. I remembered Cary and the final time I'd seen him. What had he said? I need to get stronger so me and Lars could dance all night. Déjà vu hit again. Lars seemed so familiar. Like we were more than just friends. Like he had been the person wandering the edges of the meadow. I started to cry. Had we met in a dream? That's impossible. Yet here he was, in real life. I had died that night in the hospital, but Cary had prevented me from dying. A chill flooded my entire body. I shivered, because I realized something, and it scared me. Cary, short for Charon, the ferryman of the dead of ancient legend, the original angel of death. He had kept me from dying, had mentioned Lars, had sat and talked to me in the Dandelion meadow, had finally led me away from the meadow, and told me it was time to come back to life. I had guessed right. Cary was an angel. "You're shivering," Lars said. As I leaned in and kissed Lars, it seemed a gentle ocean breeze blew through the steam room. Epilogue. Because of our schedules, we had to wait almost a year to take our honeymoon. One of the weightlifters I worked with had a cabin in the Colorado Rockies. Lars and I rented a Suburban, filled it with everything we'd need, and planned 2 weeks away from everybody. On the third evening at the cabin, we hiked a nearby footpath to a nearby meadow. The sky was clear and crisp, and we held hands. Dandelions grew everywhere in that meadow, and the slight breeze lifted the dandelion fuzzies and blew them about us. A slim moon peeked above the mountains, and stars began to come out. It was magical. Déjà vu hit me bad. I knew this place. I had lived here almost every night while I had cancer. I shivered. Holding my lover's hand, we walked to the center of the meadow. My dandelion meadow. A gentle breeze blew, smelling of the salty air of the ocean. I didn't see Cary, but I did see a flat area roughly the size and shape of a surfboard, as if it had lain there for a while. We laid down in the dandelion meadow and made love, celebrating being alive. And then we watched the stars until I fell asleep, with Lars' arms about me. I felt safe and loved, and for the first time in years, I was at peace. The early morning rain woke us, and I took Larsen's hand, pulled him close, and we danced. The end. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. This was one of those stories that came about because a word was suggested. And as you've probably guessed, the word was dandelion. I hope you enjoyed. I'm Gio, and if you'd like to hear more stories about men falling in love, please visit my channel. I have a few more there. And if you heard any noises in the background, my little dog, Latte, snores. Thank you for being with me, my friends. We'll see you next Wednesday. Peace.